I recall a verse that says, ascribe greatness to our God the Rock. His work is perfect, and all of his ways are just. Every way of God is just. God is a just God. His work is perfect. And I'm so grateful that he's loved his creation and he's loved us so much that he's given us an opportunity to come to him. As I mentioned to you a moment ago, that today is going to be a unique day. Today, tomorrow is going to be wonderful. I would certainly make my schedule around these moments because there are only a few times in your life when what you are given the opportunity to change in. You'll only meet a couple of people in all of your life. And it's at that moment that God is there to see you transformed, to do everything that he's designed for you to be. Would you stand with me, please? And would you welcome to our stage on Sunday morning for the first time, Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Rabbi. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm now officially turned on. Well, I love Pastor Rob and Pastor Linda, not only for who they are, but for the vital values that we share and the visions and understandings we have of America, of God's plans for America, of history, and God's plans for all of humanity. It is a real honor to be together with them and to be part today of the house of God that they built. We thank you very much for your welcome, and I very much do not like to go against the words of Pastor. But I'm in a little bit of a fix because my wife Susan told me one thing and Pastor told me another one. He said, introduce her, and she said, don't you do that. So I am therefore, I have to listen to my wife, right? But how can I go against the word of my friend, my host? And so all I can do is obey him in this sense and assure you, Pastor, and Susan, assure you, I am not going to introduce you. I'm not going to tell folks that there you are. And I'm not going to tell anybody that wants to meet you that they'll be able to meet you at our table outside right after we're done. Because you told me not to introduce you. And so, Pastor, I hope you'll understand that I wasn't able to exactly fulfill your request. King David completed his 19th Psalm with these words, which I'd like you to hear. It's a prayer that I want to say. I'd like you to hear the words in Hebrew, because although I know that most of you do not understand Hebrew yet, there is a rhythm and a cadence to the words in the Lord's language, which I think you'll enjoy, and then I'll tell you what the prayer says after that. Yehiyu l'ratzon imrei fi vehegyon libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May the words of my lips and the contemplations of my heart find favor before thee, O Lord, my strength and Redeemer. I pray that these words should find their way to your hearts and to be able to bring about positive transformation in the way that the Lord intends. What I want to talk about is money. Now, I know this is rather a strange idea because we're all conditioned to believe that money is somehow evil. The only people who think about money, let alone talking of it, are people who are venal and ruthless and greedy. But all the rest of us folks that are virtuous and poor take pride in our virtue and our poverty. And the question we have to ask ourselves is not what we think about that. We have to ask what the boss thinks about that. We've got to ask ourselves whether this thing we call money, that we all choose to denigrate, and although we spend many, many hours of our working week trying to get some of it, but we assure ourselves that it is of no importance to us. I don't really care about. You think I'm doing it for money? I don't care about money. That's how we're all conditioned to believe. Now, when I say conditioned, we are propagandized to believe that way by a culture that is hostile to biblical values. When I say propagandized to believe it, I want you to understand that when ideas are repeated again and again in the culture, it would be wonderful if it were true when we tell ourselves, they don't get to me. You think I pay any attention to advertisements? You think people can change my mind? Yeah, I do. Because I know they can do that to me as well. When a message is repeated again and again and again, it does have an impact. It's one of the reasons that we are prohibited from hearing gossip about other people. Right? We train ourselves that as children of God, we like talking about ideas, preferably His ideas. We do not like even talking about things, but we certainly don't want to talk about other people. Why? Because it is not possible to talk about other people without changing a reality for the worse. It's not possible to listen to other people talking about people without some of it lingering and remaining. We've got to remember that, and when we have more time, there isn't time for it this morning, but you will be able to see for yourself. There's the amazing account of while King David is fleeing from Saul, his dear friend Mephibosheth, who is handicapped and is late coming, and a vile, despicable human being who worked for Mephibosheth lies to King David and says, oh, he's joined the other side. He's opposed to you. That's why he's not here. And a few hours later, Mephibosheth shows up, and King David is very disturbed, and he says, I heard you join the other side. He says, God forbid, how can you think such a thing? I've been your brother all these years. I'm with you. And you can tell from the text and from David's response that there's a little bit of that evil message that lingers. And my friends, if King David can be influenced by propaganda, so can I, and so can you. And that's one of the reasons that business pays billions of dollars a year for advertising. The whole reason that Facebook makes money is because people advertise on it. Now, if it didn't do any good, why would you think they do that? Why would people pay for heavy and expensive advertising on television if it doesn't do any good? It does do good. Now, it doesn't mean to say that every single person, or as the advertising biz calls it, every set of eyeballs that sees an advertisement for a Chevrolet truck, that doesn't mean everyone's going to go out and buy one. Of course not. But it means out of the millions and millions of people who see the ad, there were some of them who actually were thinking of buying a truck sometime in the next little while anyways. And out of those people, there's some of them who will say, I never thought of a Chevy. I was going to get a Toyota. But there's a Chevy dealer not far from me. The ad says, go in and take a look at it. And so there'll be a small number of people who do that. And of those, there'll be a smaller number of people who try it out. And of those, there'll be a smaller number of people who buy it. But because of those big numbers, even at that end, the number of people who buy it is going to number in the hundreds or maybe the thousands. And that makes the ad worthwhile. Those are people who probably would not have got a Chevy truck had they not ever seen that ad play again and again and again. And so one of the advertisements that plays again and again and again in the culture is how bad making money is. Who is the most popular villain in movies? Who commits most of the crimes in movies? I'll give you the scene. The camera pans up the side of the shiny glass skyscraper, and then it zooms in on the office in the penthouse floor. And there, sitting behind a desk, is an evil businessman. And he is confronted by the hero who has proof that this evil businessman has been doing terrible things. And at that point, the businessman reaches into the drawer of his desk and pulls out, of course, what every business person keeps in his desk, a .357 Magnum revolver. That's what business people are like, especially successful business people, especially wealthy business people. Come on, folks, how many times have you seen that image in one form or another, right? Do you think it doesn't have an impact? Of course it does. And when you hear phrases like, and we'll hear this from politicians all the time, the rich must pay their... See how many times you've heard it? It's like a song lyric. You know it by heart. The rich must pay their fair share. What's that all about? Notice that there's no definition of rich. It's just that all of us virtuous poor people know it's not us. It's them must pay their fair share, right? And then, horror of horrors, you wake up one morning to discover that politicians have chosen you as the new rich. And there's one other problem. Nobody defines what fair is. Pastor Rob is exactly right. In Israel, if people want to swear, if they want to use obscenities and vulgarities, they use Arabic words because there aren't any in the Lord's language. And here's something else that doesn't exist in the Lord's language, the word fair. You know why? Because it can mean whatever the speaker wants it to mean. I think it's fair that you give me all your money. That would only be fair. Well, says who? That's the great thing about the word fair. And it evokes a feeling in the voting populace. Yeah, because we all see ourselves as victims. We all see ourselves as the poor. And so we figure out if everyone else has to pay their fair share, there'll be a little more for us. And we'll give our vote to those who say the rich must pay their fair share, because it sounds so good. But there isn't a word fair. It doesn't mean anything. And in the Hebrew language, in the Lord's language, no word for fair. Now, I don't know where this comes from. My wife and I have been blessed with 7 children. And I promise you that we never, ever used the word fair in our house. We never, ever said, give those candies to Tommy because that'll be more fair. We never said such a thing, ever. And yet, every one of our children, it's like they come out of the chute knowing the words, it's not fair. Like, is there some angel that teaches them that in utero? Some evil angel, I might say. I mean, where do they get this from, right? It's not fair. In Hebrew, in Israel, and my wife and I were just there, you notice little kids say, it's not fair, but there's no word in Hebrew. So what they say is, ze lo, which in Hebrew means it's not, ze lo fair. They all use the English word. The rich must pay their fair share. These are all ideas that you've been taught and propagandized and persuaded of. How many times have you heard somebody speak about a philanthropist who makes a charitable gift, and almost always you'll see the commentator on television saying, it's so wonderful to see him giving back to society. Have you heard that one? That is truly an obscenity. Because when you say, oh, it's so nice to see Bill Gates giving back to society, guess what that means he was doing to society while he was making the money in the first place? Ripping it off. Now he's giving it back. That's not what business is all about. Who has more power to take my money away from me? Government or business? Government can take my money and there's nothing I can do about it. They'll put me in jail if I don't give it. How do businesses take my money? They have to give me something of more value, which I then can choose to buy or not to buy. Who would I rather deal with? Business or government? What a choice. It's so easy. Now, why should it be important for you to have more money? Well, one reason is because I think it's important for each and every one of us to help spread God's word. And how often do you know people who take advice from people who broke? Why would you? People listen more to other folks who got a few dollars in the bank. It's just how the world really works. It's easy. That's one reason to have more money. But there's still another and more important reason to have more money, and that is because the only way you got it, if you didn't steal it or rob it, the only way you got more money is by pleasing another human being who gave it to you. And that's true for every single person here, right? People tithe, people donate generously to the church, and it's an incredible blessing. And that dollar you give, where did you get it from? I don't know the details, but I can tell you it was from another human being who gave it to you, because whatever it is you did for them was worth more to them than the dollar. Maybe it was your boss, your employer, maybe it was a customer, maybe it was a client, maybe it was a relative, but somebody gave you that money not because you poked a gun in their ribs, but because you did something for them that was worth more. That's all it is. And so if you all end up in 6 months' time with a whole lot more money than you got now, I'm thrilled. And so is God, because you've been doing things for his other children. It's the only way to get it. So please note, I'm not saying, oh, we must all pray to God for more money. No, we should pray to God for ways to serve his other children. The money follows by itself. And so when we're conditioned again and again and again, and we're told by the media, by entertainment, by politicians, by news, all the time, the message is relentless and remorseless. It goes again and again and again that having money is evidence that you're a bad person. When you start hearing that enough, it impacts how you live your life. It impacts how you start seeing yourselves. And it's for this very simple reason. And I mean, my wife and I just saw a documentary on this. We were absolutely, it's so moving. And that was the first time a human being ran a race, who ran a mile in less than 4 minutes, right? The 4-minute mile. It was Roger Bannister in May 1954 on an athletic field in Oxford in England. And nobody thought it could be done. And he broke through the tape at 3 minutes, 59.6 seconds, and the place went berserk. And you can hear the announcer saying, subject to confirmation, Roger Bannister broke the English record, the world record, the international record, running the mile in under 4. And then he said, subject to confirmation. And then another announcer says, it's not possible. Nobody can run a mile in under 4 minutes. And they will quickly announce that there was a malfunction in the timer. Because everybody took it as a given that the human being cannot run a mile in under 4 minutes. Why am I telling you this? Because you need to know how many athletes have run a mile in under 4 minutes since then. Do you think it's 1, 10, 100, or 1,000? 1,000, right? How come they didn't do it before Roger Bannister? For the very simple reason they didn't know that it could be done. All he did was prove that a human being can run a mile in under 4 minutes. Okay, fine. Once I know I can do it, I'll do it. That's what happens when you are trained to believe something wrong. When you are trained and conditioned and propagandized to believe that making money is somehow evidence that you're a bad person, you stop doing it. And I don't care what field you're in. I don't care if you're an employee or an employer. I don't care if you're looking for a job or offering a job. It makes no difference. You will not do as well as you could, not nearly as well as you could, as long as you believe that it is evil and it's doing something wrong. So we need to take a good look now at what is God's understanding of money. Not yours, not mine, not politicians, not media, not entertainment. Let's find out what he says about money. Okay. Well, I'm going to make a suggestion here for some of you, and it's only a suggestion. You obviously are free to do whatever you like, but my suggestion is that those of you taking notes, close your notebooks, put them away, put the pen in your pocket, relax. We human beings are good at only one thing at a time. It's one of the reasons that texting while driving, everybody knows, is really not a healthy idea. You can either write eloquent texts or you can drive a car, but doing them both together usually doesn't work too well. So you can either listen or you can write. And it's your choice, whatever you want to do. But I assure you this, that if the notes were so important, I could have given you better notes today than you can write. I could have brought notes, handed them out, there you go. But that's not what we're talking about. Because we're not just talking about information, we're talking about spiritual transformation. Information I can give a handout. But a spiritual transformation takes place when one human being interacts with another human being. And that's what we're doing right now. I am trying to send God's words right into your heart. Because what has to happen is a change in you. Don't for one moment think that God wants us to learn a bunch of little tricks about how to fool people and make money. That's not the idea. There's nothing about tricks. It's about learning to love everybody else. And I can tell the difference. As soon as I walk into a business, the minute I enter the doors of a company, I can tell whether the owner is somebody who loves his workers and loves his company or doesn't. I'm a big enthusiast of the profession of selling and sales. I love the profession of selling. And one of the great things about it is that you never need be unemployed. If you know how to sell, you can literally walk. I mean, there's no company in the entire country that doesn't need better sales. And that means there's not a single country a single company in the country that couldn't use a good salesperson. So you just have to know how to sell. And one of the great secrets of selling that nobody understands outside of a spiritual environment is learning to love your customer, learning to love your prospect. He's not somebody for you to use to get your commission. He's somebody for whom you can do something and thereby make our boss in heaven happier. Do you, those of you with children, do you like to see people being nice to your kids? Do you like to see people helping your children? Don't you feel good about a teacher who opens a world to your child? How do you think God feels when we take care of one of his children? And I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're saying, well, it's quite different. I'm not doing it as a volunteer. I'm taking care of other people, but that's because I want to get paid. That's what you're thinking. And there you go again, assuming that because money is involved, it taints your motives. And we're going to continue with this tonight. We're going to continue with it tomorrow night. And by the time you walk out of here tomorrow night, I promise you, you will be a different person. A different person in the same sense. I mean, when I say, for instance, let's imagine I was traveling to a city in the world with a very bad crime problem. And I'm going to have to walk around that city. So I stop in the airport bookstore at O'Hare, and I pick up a little paperback book that says Self-Defense in 20 Lessons. And I read it on the way. I arrive in this really bad city. First thing I do is walk out of the hotel, and I'm not in the least bit worried. It's late at night. I couldn't care less, because right here in my pocket is my little paperback book. And I'm walking down the street. Pretty soon I feel a sharp metal object sticking me in the back here, and an arm goes around my neck, and I hear a voice that is not terribly polite telling me that he wants my money. And he's really pulling hard on my neck, and the gun is pushing hard into my ribs. So, to say the least, I'm not comfortable. But it's not a problem, because I say to him, could you just hold on a sec, give me a break here. Attacks from the rear are chapter 17, and I just got to look that up again. No, that's not how it works. We're not talking about giving you a few little tricks here. We're talking about giving you a concentrated session in a dojo, a concentrated karate or jiu-jitsu session that takes you through developing these ideas and moving them from your head to your heart so as they become part of you and instinctive. And you've seen pictures of people who are truly trained so as that self-defense or unarmed combat are second nature. The minute somebody starts up with them, they're lying on the ground, seriously injured. And their hands and their feet move so quickly you barely notice it. Do you think they stop to figure out, let's see, hand first? No, it's become part of them. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. So let's try and understand what is part of God's plan. What's part of God's plan is that at the very beginning of the Bible, God creates everything. And everything that God creates, he likes, correct? God saw this was good, he saw that was good. And the very first time we find God not liking something is when God says, and it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. Now, obviously, on its most elementary level, we're talking about marriage. Because what happens soon after this is God introduces Adam to Eve. And as you know, Adam introduced himself to Eve in one of the most famous palindromes of all time. He bowed to her and he said, "Madam, I'm Adam." And she said, "That's cool, you can read that from both ends." "Madam, I'm Adam." "Madam, I'm..." "Yeah, that's really neat." And Adam said, Well, that's because marriage is a two-way street. Now, to be honest, I've added in some of this stuff. But the details I do teach and teach very extensively, including the point that Pastor made earlier, that sometimes men say things that they may even think they believe, but it doesn't mean that they're accurate or true. And sometimes women willingly believe those things because they want to. And exactly what men and women should be doing with one another, both before marriage and after marriage, these are things that I teach, and I teach very extensively, because it's obviously a major part of God's plan for humanity. So much so that we're told all about it in the 2nd chapter. The minute the world was created, the very next thing we start talking about is male-female relationships. Right there. And this idea of a male-female relationship as a fundamental principle of human interaction is so important that the Song of Songs, King Solomon wrote the Song of Songs, and everybody knows you can read it as a most beautiful love song. But what maybe not everybody knows is that you can read it just as much as a metaphor of love between God and his children. Because if we don't really understand the depths of feeling and the passion that can exist between a man and a woman, then we don't truly get the depths of passion and love that can exist between us and our Creator. We also don't understand the extent to which our love for one another can produce the most amazing outcome. Just as the love between a man and a woman can create something with limitless potential. We truly become partners with God in creation when a baby is brought into the world. Who knows what wonders that baby could achieve in his or her life? And in exactly the same way, when human beings partner with one another in a business context, the potential for incredible creativity is found as well. And so when God says not good for man to be alone, one of the things he's telling us is that people who are isolated from other people do not make money. And what is money? It's evidence that you have served another human being. So let me just get out of the way right now the whole question of, does God want us to be rich? Well, those of you who think, yes, I'd really appreciate it if after we're done, you come out to me at the lobby and explain to me how you know that, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that God wants us to be rich, and I'm really interested to find out if that's the case. All I know is that God wants us to be obsessively preoccupied with the needs and the wants of all his other children. And a good and loving God rewards that dedication to his other children with the incredible blessing of financial abundance. Does God want me to be rich? I don't know about that, but I do know he wants me to focus on trying to please his other children. And if I do that, well, why wouldn't he bless me? Who does more for more human beings? Mother Teresa or Bill Gates? I didn't say who's more saintly, because I wouldn't know that. Only God would know that. I only asked you who has done more for more human beings. The answer is Bill Gates. It's very simple. When you do a lot for other human beings, don't be surprised if the blessings flow. And this is one of the reasons that we have a strange thing going on in the Bible. Early on, we've got the story of Cain. And what does Cain do? Well, if you take a look in chapter 4, Cain actually takes Abel into the field and he speaks to him. What does he say? The Bible doesn't report. You know why? Because God doesn't tell us anything we can figure out for ourselves. He doesn't want to be our nanny. He wants to be our God. And so we're supposed to figure out quite easily, and ancient Jewish wisdom steps in to help us and explain what Cain really said to Abel. It's pretty obvious when you hear it. He said, Abel, Dad's getting old. When he dies, there's a whole world that's got to be divided between you and me. And since I'm the oldest son, I'll be taking the whole world. But the good news is, you can live wherever you like, you just have to pay me rent. That's right. Abel responds and says, that's not how it's going to be. We're going to divide it in two. You're going to have half the world, I'm going to have half the world, and I'll be taking North America. Okay, that part I did add in. But now, if you're Cain, and here's something you have to know. In the Lord's language, I always tell people everyone needs a rabbi. And I humbly submit myself for that job. Why? Because the Hebrew is really important. In English, you got names, like Fred and Jennifer and Tom and Agatha, and the names are just names. They don't actually mean anything, and if they do, it's just something your parents liked. But in the Bible, every name has a vital meaning. What does Cain mean? Material acquisition. I want stuff, everything. Now, if you have a name Cain, and your entire existence is getting stuff, and here comes Abel, your brother, who is now robbing you of half the world, because you're going to take the whole world, and he says, no, you're only going to get half. What's the only thing to do to him? You've got to kill him, obviously. Obviously. And so Cain proceeds to do exactly that, and God speaks to him, and Cain finally gets it. And what's Cain's act of penance? What does he do? Well, the first thing he does is he goes ahead and has a child, Enoch. What does that mean in Hebrew? I've been educated. That's what the word means. Well, that makes sense. I took a life out of the world, so obviously the very first thing I've got to do is bring a new life into the world. So he has a child called Enoch. What's the next thing he does? He builds a city. Remember that? This is the first mention of a city in all of Scripture. What's going on? Like, how many people are there in the world at this point? Like 4, 3, 5? I don't even need a village, let alone a city. What's that all about? Because we have to understand what the meaning of a city really is. Where do you make more money? In a desert or in a city? Right. And if somebody says to you, I want to open up a jewelry store, and so I'm going to open it up in the Sahara Desert, and you say, why are you going to open a jewelry store there? He says, no competition. You'd laugh. It doesn't make any sense, right? Where would you tell him to open it? Not only in a city, but the biggest city he can find. And whereabout in that city? A place called the Jewelry District. And he'd say, I don't get it. You're telling me I must open it up in the same block where there are a whole other bunch of other jewelry stores. That's right. That's how God arranged it. Because if there's only one jewelry store, it might attract, let's say, 100 customers a week. But if there are 2 jewelry stores there, it's not going to attract 200 customers a week. It'll attract 300 because it's a little jewelry district. And when there are 10 stores there, and then all of a sudden, it's a major destination. And what's more, everyone in every jewelry store has its own particular approach. And what do people say? If you come to my jewelry store and you're looking for something I don't carry, I'll tell you, go over to Joe's store. He carries what you're looking for. And I have no problem doing that because tomorrow Joe will send somebody to me. Cities are places where people can do more for one another than they can elsewhere. Cities are the essential basis of a civilization. Cities do not grow because human beings have farms, and eventually there are a bunch of farms, and they make a little village, and the village grows into a town. That's not how it works. Cities are the absolute essence of a culture. And that's why it is, heaven forbid, in times of war, right? Great Britain and America bombed what in Germany? They bombed the cities of Berlin and Dresden. Why didn't they bomb the farmlands that feed everybody in Germany during World War II? They didn't do that. When the Germans were trying to wipe out England, it was in the summer of 1941, it was the Blitz. They bombed London. When America wanted to make Japan surrender, why didn't they bomb all the rice paddies and starve them out? No, they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The cities are the essence and the core of a culture. You know why? Because cities prove that God created the world. The Grand Canyon might have come about because over who knows how many years, wind and rain eroded and the Colorado River made the Grand Canyon. When I look at the Grand Canyon, I don't say, wow, look what God did. I mean, he did, but it doesn't yell that out to me because, yeah, it could have happened by itself. But when I see a city with millions of people all collaborating and cooperating and building towers and buildings and sewer systems and streets and subways and buildings and bridges, and all of this is the result of human beings working together with one another, this is not a beehive. This is not a beaver lodge. This is not an ant nest. This is something unique. This is something that only human beings, touched by the finger of God, are capable of building. And a city is a place that exists because people are doing things for one another all the time. Yes, they're getting paid for it. They're selling things, they're providing services, but that's not the point. The point is what it is that they really are doing for one another. And so we begin to understand the basics here, that God has a plan for humanity. The plan is connection and unity. That's why it is that the best things that we desire and need all the time are things that are only the result of connections and combinations. What's a musical note worth? Nothing. But what happens when a talented musician strings together musical notes and we can hear the songs of worship as we did? That's because of combining notes. Or how's about the fact that God put in the world 92 elements? And I don't think there's a single thing going on around here that is the result of any one of those elements. The chairs you're sitting on are complicated mixtures of different elements that make wood and plastic. The air you breathe is a combination of the elements of oxygen and nitrogen. The water we drink is a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. Everything that we find useful is a combination of the things that God put in the world, those 92 elements, not that useful by themselves. One of them is iron. You've not used iron for anything, probably never. But steel, now steel is very useful. Steel is a mixture of iron and carbon and chrome, and you take a whole bunch of elements and put them together, now things work. This is part of God's message, which is why, by the way, the first 34 chapters of the book of Genesis tell the story of creation. How many separate, distinctive Hebrew words in that entire 34 verses? 92. One for each element. God put into the world 92 elements. He created the world with 92 Hebrew words in the first 34 verses of Genesis, and everything else is combination. Man and woman, partners, friends, whenever anything happens, it's the result of an interaction with another human being. I think I could go as far as to say, and I bet you would agree, I bet I'm going to see some heads nodding when I tell you that your best times ever, your biggest successes and your best achievements have never been you by yourself. They've always been the result of at least one other person. A sibling, a parent, a teacher, a partner, a mentor, a friend. Somebody played a part in your life and made it possible for you to do what you're doing. This is the key of the approach we're going to be picking up from tonight and beginning to understand how money and relationships tie together. And what it is that each and every one of us, I don't care where you are, I don't care whether you're starting your career or ending it, whether you're employed or unemployed, it doesn't matter. But every single person can dramatically change their financial destiny. But you do it by absorbing fundamental ideas that change how you operate and change how you interact with every other person in your life, which changes the results that you are going to receive. Now, all of this springs from the ancient Jewish wisdom embedded within the text. It springs from understanding the ideas that come out of the words and come out of the stories. The 11th chapter of Genesis. Do you think that's just a story about the Tower of Babel? No, there's much more to that. We've got to understand that therein lies a full understanding and explanation of the war against wealth that is waged by a society that decides to go against God. Could that have something to do with the fact that every single society based on atheism is a financial basket case, and every society that is based on God is a wealth-producing society? Could that have anything to do with it? Is it an accident that great cities of the world came about from countries that knew the Bible? Is it an accident that the biggest area of wealth creation in the entire planet are countries where the Bible was known? Are these just coincidences? Coincidence, that's another word that doesn't exist in the Lord's language. There are no coincidences. And so we're going to go along and we're going to take a deep look. No, there are no coincidences. You're here today. That's not a coincidence. And when we pick it up this evening and take it further, that's not a coincidence either. And when we wrap it up tomorrow night and you're ready to step back out into the world, a transformed human being in synchronicity with God's plans for us, for our relationship with other people, and for our relationship with money. And so, for those of you who are interested in getting a head start on some of this, meet me outside, meet Susan outside, and we will show you that there are resources that we've brought. And I'm going to do my absolute best between tonight and tomorrow night to give you as much as I possibly can of the entire approach. Some of the details you're going to have to work on by yourself. There's practice. There are things you have to do. And all of that is embedded in some of the resources that we have. We have something called the Genesis Journeys set. And we have, in there are going to be insights and tools and techniques that each and every one of us needs to apply in our lives. You remember I said that I like to think everyone needs a rabbi? Well, let me tell you what the name of my website is, because that way you can put your name down and get a free weekly email. We send out a spiritual strategy along the lines we're discussing every single week. You want to get it, just go to the website. Now, you don't have to write it down. Remember I said, just focus on listening and you'll remember. It's really easy. You ready? YouNeedARabbi.com. All righty. Most people get very upset, very, very anxious, very embarrassed when I say, who wants to make more money? And I'm hoping that even if you're not ready to put your hand up right now on that, I'm hoping that by the time we're done tonight, I'm pretty sure you will. Because you will come to see that wanting to make more money is not evidence that you're a greedy person. It's evidence that you want to do more for God's other children. And what I'm going to show you, both tonight and also in our materials, are the specific steps and the specific strategies that each and every person can bring into their own lives to make it possible to step into line with God's plan for human beings and for money. See you tonight. God bless.